The wine was a Pinot Noir, decent enough for a Tuesday, but not significant enough to warrant the toast my sister raised halfway through the second glass. We were sitting in the dining room, the one with the mahogany table that had belonged to our mother, surrounded by 6 of Sarah's closest friends from the country club. The candlelight flickered against the crystal, casting long, dancing shadows across the walls that I had painted only a year prior. I remember the exact shade because I had spent 3 weekends testing samples before settling on a warm greige that complemented the hardwood floors. It was my house. I knew the grain of the wood under my fingertips, I knew the way the light hit the kitchen island at 4 in the afternoon, and I knew the specific rattle of the boiler in the basement when the temperature dropped below freezing. But listening to Sarah speak, leaning back in the chair that should have been mine at the head of the table, you would have thought I was merely a favor she had granted shelter to for the past 18 months. She gestured toward me with her fork, a casual sweep of her hand that dismissed my presence even as she acknowledged it. She told them that I was staying with her for a while, that I was going through a rough patch, and that she was generous enough to let me occupy the guest wing while she managed the property. She said I was a guest. She said the property was hers to manage. The friends nodded, sympathetic smiles directed at me, pitying looks that stung not because they were cruel, but because they were based on a lie so audacious it required a specific kind of arrogance to maintain. I did not correct her. I did not flush with anger or stumble over my words to clarify the deed holder's name. I simply took a sip of my wine, set the glass down on the coaster I had bought, and smiled back at her with a calmness that I had cultivated over months of silent observation. In that moment, watching the confidence radiate off her as she claimed ownership of my life, I felt something shift inside me. It was not heat. It was not rage. It was a cooling, a solidification of purpose. I realized then that the time for subtle hints and passive reminders was over. She had drawn a line in the sand, claiming territory that was legally, financially, and morally mine, and she had done it in front of witnesses. This was no longer a family dispute about boundaries or shared grief over our parents. This was a declaration of war, and because I am who I am, I did not meet fire with fire. I met fire with documentation. To understand why this moment was the catalyst, you have to understand the history of the house itself. It was not just a structure of wood and brick. It was the physical manifestation of our family's stability, the one constant in a childhood defined by our father's frequent business trips and our mother's quiet melancholy. When they passed, within 6 months of each other, the estate was left to me. I was the elder sister, 40 years old at the time, steady, employed as a forensic accountant, and unmarried. Sarah was 36, freshly divorced, unemployed, and volatile. The will was explicit. There were no ambiguities. The house, the investments, the residual accounts, all of it bore my name. Sarah received a lump sum settlement, enough to clear her debts and start over if she had chosen to do so. Instead, she chose dependency. She called me the week after the funeral, her voice thick with a grief that I suspected was more about loss of status than loss of parents. She said she couldn't stay in her apartment, that the memories were too much, that she needed to be close to the family home to feel connected to them. I agreed to let her stay. I told her it was temporary, 6 months at most, until she found her footing. I drafted a simple licensing agreement, not a lease, because I did not want to establish tenancy rights if I could avoid it. She signed it without reading, eager to move her boxes into the East Wing. For the first few months, the arrangement worked. She kept to herself, helped with some gardening, and seemed to be looking for work. But grief is a strange alchemist, and in Sarah's hands, it turned into entitlement. Slowly, the boundaries began to erode. First, it was small things. She rearranged the furniture in the living room without asking. Then she changed the locks on the front door because she said she was worried about security, handing me a new key as if she were doing me a favor. Then came the neighbors. I would come home from work to find Sarah hosting book clubs or wine nights, introducing me to strangers as her sister who was helping out around the place. The narrative began to shift in the community. I heard it from the mail carrier, who asked if I was still house-sitting for Sarah. I heard it from the landscaper, who sent invoices to her email address because she told him she was the point of contact. It was a slow drip of erosion, wearing away my ownership one drop at a time until the foundation felt unstable. but I said nothing. I am a forensic accountant by trade. My job is to look at the numbers, follow the trail, and find the discrepancy. I applied the same logic to my sister. I stopped reacting emotionally to her provocations and started collecting data. The dinner party was the tipping point because it moved the deception from the private sphere into the public record of social perception. If she was willing to tell her friends I was a guest, she was willing to tell anyone anything. And if she was willing to tell anyone anything, she was likely preparing to make that lie a legal reality. I had seen this pattern before in my work. Fraud rarely happens in a single explosion. It happens in a series of small, unchallenged assumptions. Once people believe you own something, it becomes easier to forge the documents that prove you own something. I knew I had to act before she tried to refinance the mortgage or, worse, claim adverse possession. In this state, squatters' rights are difficult to claim if you have permission to be there. But if she could convince a court that I had abandoned the property and she had maintained it as her primary residence for a certain period, the legal battle would become messy, expensive, and public. I wanted none of those things. I wanted cleanliness. I wanted precision. I wanted her out without having to raise my voice. So, the night of the dinner party, after the last guest had left and Sarah was humming in the kitchen as she loaded the dishwasher with my china, I went to my home office in the West Wing and locked the door. I opened my laptop and began the audit. I needed to verify everything. I needed to know exactly where I stood before I made my first move. I logged into the county assessor's portal. The property tax bills were all in my name. That was the first anchor. The legal description matched the deed I had in my safe deposit box. The mailing address for the tax statements was this house, but the emails were going to my private account, which Sarah did not have access to. However, I noticed something else. Sarah had set up a utility account in her name for the electricity and water. She had also changed the address on her driver's license to this property. These were small flags, but they were flags nonetheless. She was building a paper trail of residency. I downloaded every document I could find. I scanned the original will, the probate court judgment, the deed transfer, and the licensing agreement she had signed 18 months ago. I created a digital folder labeled Estate Management and began to organize the timeline. I needed to prove that her presence was permissive, not proprietary. I needed to prove that every improvement she made to the house was done with the owner's consent, which negated any claim of ownership through improvement. It was meticulous work, the kind that soothes me. There is comfort in facts. Facts do not lie, and facts do not get emotional. While Sarah slept upstairs, dreaming of the life she had convinced herself was hers, I was building the cage that would eventually hold her. The next morning, I maintained the routine. I made coffee, I read the news, I went to work. I did not give her the satisfaction of seeing me disturbed. When she came down around 10, wearing a silk robe that had belonged to our mother, she asked if I had enjoyed the night. I told her it was pleasant. She asked if I minded that she had told her friends I was staying there indefinitely. I told her I didn't mind, because I knew the truth was already secured. She smiled, a tight, victorious expression, and mentioned that she was meeting with a financial advisor later that week to discuss asset consolidation. That was the second flag, asset consolidation. She was planning to leverage the equity in the house. She likely believed that since she had been living there, paying the utilities, and managing the upkeep, she had established some form of equitable interest. Or perhaps she thought she could convince a lender that she was the primary occupant and co-owner. It didn't matter what she thought. It only mattered what the records showed. But I needed to be sure. I needed to know if she had already attempted to access the deed. I called the county recorder's office that afternoon, posing as a title researcher. I asked if there were any pending liens or documents recorded against the property address in the last 30 days. The clerk said no, nothing had been filed. Yet, she was in the planning stage. This gave me time. Time is the most valuable currency in a legal strategy. If I moved too fast, she would scramble, hire a lawyer, and drag this out for years. If I waited, letting her commit further to her delusion, the fall would be harder. I decided to let her proceed. I wanted her to spend money. I wanted her to make commitments based on the assumption of ownership. I wanted the damages to be quantifiable. So, I adopted a strategy of passive encouragement. When she mentioned wanting to renovate the kitchen to increase the property value, I told her it was a good idea. When she talked about refinancing to lower the monthly outgoings, I told her she should look into the rates. I became the mirror that reflected her arrogance back at her, validating her assumptions so she would walk confidently into the trap. It feels cruel to say it, but justice often requires a certain level of detachment. I was not punishing her for being my sister. I was correcting an error in the ledger. Over the next 3 months, the escalation was subtle but steady. Sarah began to treat the house as if she were already the sole proprietor. She hired a contractor to redo the master bathroom, signing the contract herself. She invited a real estate agent to do a comparative market analysis, ostensibly to see what the neighborhood was doing, but I knew she was testing the waters for a sale. I allowed all of this. I documented all of this. I took photos of the contracts she left on the kitchen counter. I saved the emails she accidentally left open on the shared family iPad. I recorded the conversations we had about the house, not secretly, but openly, because in this state, one-party consent is legal, and I was always a party to the conversation. I would ask her clarifying questions. So, you're paying the contractor directly? Yes, I'm handling all the improvements. And you plan to recoup that cost when you sell? Obviously, it's my equity. I collected these statements like rare coins. Each one was a piece of evidence that proved she understood the transactional nature of the property, yet believed she was the one holding the assets. Meanwhile, I ensured that the property taxes were paid from my account. I made sure the mortgage was paid from my account. I kept the financial leash tight, even as I loosened the verbal one. I wanted there to be no ambiguity about who was carrying the financial burden of the ownership. If she claimed she was contributing to the equity, the bank records would show otherwise. I was building a fortress of paper, and she was busy decorating the walls inside it, unaware that the doors were about to be locked from the outside. The turning point came in early November. Sarah called me at work, her voice vibrating with an excitement that I recognized as dangerous. She had found a lender. She said they were willing to offer a home equity line of credit based on the improved value of the property. She needed my signature, she said, because my name was still on the deed as a formality, but she assured me the lender understood she was the primary owner and operator. This was it. This was the fraud. She was asking me to co-sign a loan on my own property, under the pretense that she owned it, which would effectively subordinate my ownership to her debt. If I signed, I would be liable for the debt without controlling the asset. If I refused, she would claim I was blocking her access to her own money. It was a classic squeeze play. I told her I needed to review the loan documents before I signed anything. I told her to have the lender send them to my email. She hesitated, then agreed, confident that I would not dare to scrutinize the details. She believed I was passive. She believed I was weak. She believed that our family dynamic, where she was the charismatic center and I was the quiet support, still held true. She did not understand that I had spent 20 years analyzing fraud for a living. I knew exactly what to look for. When the documents arrived, they were exactly as I feared. The application listed Sarah as the primary borrower and me as a non-occupying co-borrower. The property address was listed as her primary residence. There was a clause stating that all borrowers certify the accuracy of the ownership information. If I signed this, I would be perjuring myself. But I wouldn't sign it. Instead, I forwarded the entire email chain, attachments included, to my attorney. I had retained counsel 2 weeks prior, a sharp woman named Margaret who specialized in real estate litigation and family law. Margaret reviewed the documents and confirmed what I already knew. This was attempted fraud. But more than that, it was the leverage I needed. I didn't just want to stop the loan. I wanted to end the arrangement. I wanted Sarah out, and I wanted her to understand that her tenure was over. Margaret advised me to send a formal notice to vacate. Since she had been living there for over a year, she had established tenancy rights, regardless of the licensing agreement. I couldn't just change the locks. I had to follow the eviction process, but I could speed it up. I could make the cost of staying so high, legally and financially, that she would choose to leave. I scheduled the confrontation for a Friday afternoon. I chose Friday because it gave the weekend for the initial shock to settle before the work week began, and it ensured that if she needed to find temporary housing, She would have to move quickly. I asked Sarah to meet me in the living room at 4 o'clock. I told her I had the loan documents ready to discuss. She arrived dressed in business casual attire, ready to go to the bank afterward. She sat on the sofa, crossing her legs, tapping her foot with impatience. I sat in the armchair opposite her, the leather cool against my skin. I placed a manila folder on the coffee table between us. I did not open it immediately. I let the silence stretch, letting her fill it with her own assumptions. She asked if I had read the terms. I told her I had reviewed everything. I told her I had also reviewed the deed, the tax records, and the original probate filing. Her smile faltered. I opened the folder and slid the first page toward her. It was a copy of the deed. Her name was not on it. I slid the second page toward her. It was the property tax bill from the previous year. It was addressed to me. I slid the third page toward her. It was the licensing agreement she had signed 18 months ago, with her signature clearly visible at the bottom, acknowledging my ownership and her status as a licensee. I watched her face as she read. The color drained from her cheeks, replaced by a blotchy redness that started at her neck and moved up. She looked from the papers to me, her eyes searching for a crack in my composure. She found none. I told her that the loan application contained false statements regarding ownership. I told her that submitting it would constitute bank fraud. I told her that I had already forwarded the evidence to my attorney, who was prepared to file a report with the state banking regulator if the application was not withdrawn immediately. She started to speak, to stammer out an explanation, but I held up my hand. I was not here to listen to her excuses. I was here to deliver the verdict. I told her that her license to occupy the property was terminated. I handed her the final document in the folder. It was a formal notice to vacate, giving her 30 days to remove herself and her belongings from the premises. I cited the breach of the licensing agreement, specifically the clause regarding misrepresentation of ownership and attempted financial encumbrance of the asset. I told her that if she remained past the 30 days, I would file for formal eviction, and I would seek damages for the unauthorized renovations and the legal fees incurred. I told her that I would also be seeking restitution for the utilities she had billed to the property under the false pretense of ownership. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with the weight of her collapsing world. She looked at the papers again, as if hoping the words would change if she looked hard enough. She tried to pivot to emotion. She brought up our parents. She said they would want us to stay together. She said I was being cold, that I was throwing her out onto the street. I listened to all of it. I let her speak until she ran out of breath. Then I reminded her that our parents had left the house to me for a reason. I reminded her that I had supported her for 18 months without asking for rent. I reminded her that she had tried to steal my home. I told her that the 30 days were a courtesy, not a negotiation. I stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. I told her that Margaret would be in touch regarding the withdrawal of the loan application. I told her not to contact me directly again. All communication should go through counsel. I walked out of the living room and went up to my office. I closed the door. I did not cry. I did not shake. I sat at my desk and opened my spreadsheet. I updated the status of the property from occupied by licensee to vacancy pending. I created a new tab for legal expenses. I focused on the numbers. The numbers were safe. The numbers made sense. Downstairs, I could hear her moving around. I heard the slam of a cupboard, the heavy tread of her footsteps on the hardwood. I heard her phone ringing, likely calling our mother's old friends, trying to rally support, trying to spin the narrative. It didn't matter. The narrative was no longer hers to control. The documents spoke louder than her voice. The next 30 days were a study in tension. Sarah did not leave immediately. She tested the boundaries, as I knew she would. She stopped paying the utilities, assuming I would cover them to keep the lights on. I did not. I let the notices accumulate. I let the water get shut off for a day before I paid it to prevent pipe damage, documenting the interruption as a consequence of her non-payment. She tried to invite people over, but I had changed the codes on the security system and instructed the alarm company to flag any unauthorized entry attempts. She tried to claim that some of the furniture was hers, but I had the purchase receipts for everything in the house, dated from before she moved in. Every move she made was met with a countermove, calm and documented. I did not engage in arguments. If she shouted, I recorded it. If she threatened, I emailed the transcript to Margaret. I became a ghost in my own home, present but untouchable, moving through the halls with a quiet purpose that unnerved her more than any anger could have. She realized that she could not manipulate me because I was no longer playing the role of the sister. I was playing the role of the owner, and an owner does not negotiate with a squatter. The neighbors began to notice the shift. They saw the moving trucks she eventually had to hire. They saw the boxes piled on the lawn. They heard the raised voices, though they could not hear my side of the conversation. The story in the community began to change. The mail carrier stopped asking if I was house-sitting. The landscaper sent the invoices to me again. The order was being restored, piece by piece. On the 29th day, Sarah left. She did not say goodbye. She loaded her car with what she could carry and hired a van for the rest. She left the house in a state of disarray, but not damaged. She knew better than to cause physical destruction. She knew I would sue for that too. She left a note on the kitchen counter. It was short. It said that I would regret this, that family was all we had, and that I had chosen money over blood. I read the note, then I placed it in the folder with the rest of the evidence. It was just another document. It held no power over me. When the door closed behind her, the silence in the house was different. It was not empty, it was waiting. I walked through the rooms, inspecting the damage. There were scuff marks on the floor where she had dragged the furniture. There were holes in the drywall where she had hung pictures without asking. There was a smell of her perfume lingering in the hallway, cloying and sweet. I opened the windows. I let the cold air rush in. I called the cleaning service I had used for years. I called the painter. I called the locksmith to change the cylinders again, just to be sure. I began the process of reclaiming the space. It was not about erasing her, it was about reasserting the reality of the house. This was my home. It had always been my home. She had just been visiting, however long the visit had lasted. The financial aftermath was straightforward. Margaret sent a demand letter to Sarah regarding the unpaid utilities and the cost of the legal fees. Sarah did not pay. I had expected this. She had no money, but the debt was recorded. I filed a lien against any future assets she might acquire. It was a symbolic gesture mostly, but it sent a message. I was watching. I was keeping the ledger. The loan application was withdrawn, and the lender flagged her file. She would not be able to secure financing easily in the future. Her credit took a hit. Her reputation among her friends took a hit. When they asked what happened, she could not tell them the truth without admitting to the fraud. She had to say we had a disagreement. She had to say I was difficult. But the doubt was there. People know when a story doesn't add up. They saw the tax bills. They saw the deed. The social capital she had tried to build on the foundation of my property evaporated. She moved into a small apartment across town. I heard this through mutual contacts. I did not reach out. I did not check on her. The relationship was terminated just like the license. It was a clean cut. There was no bleeding, only the scar that would remain. In the weeks that followed, I settled back into the rhythm of the house. I repainted the dining room. I kept the color, but I refreshed the finish. I bought new china. I hosted a dinner party of my own. I invited friends who knew the truth, who knew the history, who knew who owned the table they were sitting at. There was no toast about generosity. There was no ambiguity about my place at the head of the table. I looked around the room, at the faces of people who respected me for who I was, not for what they could take from me. I felt a sense of peace that I had not felt in years. It was not happiness, exactly. Happiness is fleeting. This was stability. This was order. I had protected what was mine. I had not let emotion cloud my judgment. I had not let guilt dictate my actions. I had used the tools available to me, the law, the records, the truth, and I had wielded them with precision. Sometimes people ask me if I feel bad about it. They ask if I miss her. They say that family is complicated, that maybe I could have handled it differently. I tell them that I did handle it correctly. Betrayal is not complicated. Theft is not complicated. When someone tries to take what you have built, what you have inherited, what is legally yours, you do not negotiate. You do not compromise, you protect. I look at the house now, and I see the work I put into it. I see the decisions I made. I see the life I have built within these walls. Sarah's presence was a glitch, a temporary error in the system that has now been corrected. The property tax bills still come in my name. The deed is still in my name. The life is still mine. And I sleep soundly at night, knowing that the locks are secure, the records are accurate, and the boundaries are clear. There is a specific kind of power in knowing that you cannot be moved. It is not the power of aggression. It is the power of permanence. I am not a guest in my own life. I am the owner. And anyone who forgets that will be reminded, not with shouting, but with papers. Not with violence, but with validity. The process of reclaiming oneself after a betrayal is often described as healing, as if it is a wound that needs to close. I do not see it that way. I see it as restructuring. When a building is compromised, you do not just patch the crack. You reinforce the foundation. You check the load-bearing walls. You ensure the structure can withstand the next storm. That is what I did. I reinforced my boundaries. I checked my legal standing. I ensured that I could withstand any future attempt at manipulation. I am stronger now, not because I survived the attack, but because I engineered the defense. I learned that kindness without boundaries is just an invitation for exploitation. I learned that love without respect is just dependency. And I learned that sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to be cold. To be clear, to be absolute. I think about that night at the dinner table often. The way the candle light flickered. The way Sarah's voice sounded so sure of itself, it seems like a lifetime ago. Sometimes I walk into the dining room and run my hand over the mahogany table. It feels solid. It feels real. I remember the wine, the lies, the pitying looks. And I remember the feeling of the cool glass in my hand, the decision I made in that second to stay silent. That silence was not weakness. It was the sound of a trap closing. It was the sound of me choosing myself. I pour a glass of wine now, sometimes, just to sit in this room. I drink it slowly. I listen to the house settle around me. The boiler rattles in the basement. The wind moves through the trees in the garden. Everything is in its place. The order has been restored, and I am the one who restored it. There are no loose ends. I reviewed the file one last time before I put it away in the safe. The notice to vacate was signed for. The utility accounts were transferred back to my name exclusively. The security codes were updated. The lawyer's invoice was paid in full. There is nothing left to do. The case is closed. I close the safe and turn the dial. The click of the lock is satisfying. It is a final sound. I stand up and walk out of the office, turning off the light as I go. The hallway is dark, but I know the way. I know where every step leads. I know what belongs to me, and I know that no one can tell me otherwise. Not my sister. Not her friends, not the neighbors. The truth is written in the county records, and it is written in the way I walk through these halls. I am not a guest. I am a leaner. And this is my house. The days turn into weeks and the weeks into months. The seasons change outside the windows. The leaves fall, then the snow comes, then the buds return. Life continues, but the dynamic has shifted permanently. I receive the occasional letter from Sarah, sent through her lawyer, trying to negotiate visitation or claim rights to some heirloom she says she left behind. I deny them all. Every item she left was donated or discarded. There is nothing of hers here. I do not hold on to artifacts of the betrayal. I do not need reminders. The house is clean. I have purged the energy of her entitlement from the rooms. I have replaced the things she touched with things I chose. It is a fresh start, not because I forgot the past, but because I resolved it. I did not leave it hanging. I did not let it fester. I cut it out. I think about the women who might hear this story. The women who are being told they are guests in their own lives. The women who are being asked to shrink, to share, to apologize for taking up space. I want them to know that you do not have to scream to be heard. You do not have to fight dirty to win. You can win with the truth. You can win with the records. You can win by knowing exactly what you own and refusing to let anyone else sign their name to it. It requires patience. It requires a coldness that people might call cruel. But it is not cruel to protect what is yours. It is necessary. It is the only way to maintain integrity in a world that tries to chip away at it. I am not a hero. I am just a woman who read the fine print. I am just a woman who decided that enough was enough. And I am here, in my home, with the lights on and the door locked, safe in the knowledge that I am the owner of my own destiny. The sun is setting now, casting that same warm grayish light across the walls. I sit in the chair at the head of the table. I wait for no one. I answer to no one. I drink my wine. And I watch the shadows dance, knowing that they cannot touch me. I am the one who controls the light. I am the one who pays the bills. I am the one who holds the deed. And that is all that matters. The story is over. The record is set. And I am still here. There is a specific satisfaction in watching a liar run out of room to lie. When Sarah was here, she wove a web of inconsistencies. She told the neighbors one thing, the bank another, and me something else. She thought the distance between us would hide the contradictions, but I closed the distance. I brought the facts into the same room. I laid them out side by side. And when the contradictions became visible, the web collapsed. It is a mechanical process. Truth exerts pressure on falsehood until the falsehood breaks. I simply applied the pressure. I did not have to push hard. I just had to be steady. I had to be the immovable object. And she was the unstoppable force that crashed against me and shattered. I recall the day the movers came. Sarah stood on the driveway, directing them, her voice shrill. She was trying to maintain control until the very last second. She told them to be careful with her antiques. The movers looked at me for confirmation. I shook my head. I told them to load what was on the list. Anything else stays. She argued. I showed them the inventory sheet I had prepared. I showed them the receipts. The movers shrugged and left the disputed items on the curb. She had to choose between fighting me in front of strangers or letting the items go. She let them go. It was a small victory, but it was symbolic. She was losing possession. She was losing authority. She was losing the narrative. By the time the truck pulled away, she was standing alone on the driveway. I watched her from the window. She looked small. Not physically, but essentially. The persona she had built around the house had been stripped away. Without the house, she was just a woman with a lot of debt and a damaged reputation. I closed the curtain. I did not need to watch her leave. I knew she was gone. Now, when I walk through the neighborhood, people greet me differently. There is a respect in their eyes that wasn't there before. They know what happened. Word travels in these communities. They know I stood my ground. They know I didn't let myself be pushed out. It changes the dynamic. I am no longer the quiet sister in the background. I am the owner of the estate. I am the matriarch of this property. And I carry that title with a weight that I earned. It was not given to me easily. I had to defend it. And in defending it, I claimed it fully. Before, I owned the house on paper. Now, I own it in reality. The distinction is important. Ownership is not just a legal status. It is a state of mind. It is the confidence to say, this is mine, and mean it. Sarah tried to take that confidence from me. She tried to make me doubt my own rights. But I trusted the documents. I trusted the law. And I trusted myself. I sometimes wonder if she thinks about the house. If she drives by and looks at the windows. If she wonders what I changed. If she regrets the greed that cost her everything. I hope she does. Not because I wish her pain, but because I wish her understanding. I wish for her to realize that what she lost was not just a place to live, but the chance to have a relationship with her sister. She traded that for equity that didn't exist. She traded love for leverage, and she lost both. It is a poor bargain. I would not make it. I value my peace more than I value her approval. I value my security more than I value her comfort. And I value the truth more than I value the harmony of a lie. The night is deep now. The house is quiet. I finish my wine and rinse the glass. I place it in the dishwasher, stacking it carefully among the others. I turn on the machine. The hum of the water is a comforting sound. It signifies routine. It signifies normalcy. I walk through the house, checking the locks one last time. Front door, back door, garage, windows all secure. I turn off the lights room by room, leaving the house in darkness. I climb the stairs to my bedroom. I close the door. I lie down in the bed. I close my eyes, and I sleep. I sleep without worry. I sleep without fear. I sleep in my own house. And that is the greatest revenge of all, to live well, to live safely, to live freely. She said I was a guest, but I am the host. I am the owner. I am the master of this domain. And I will remain so for as long as I choose. The tax bills will come, I will pay them. The deed will remain, I will keep it. And the story will end where it began. With me, in control, in charge, at home. There is no need for further explanation. The facts speak for themselves. The records are public. The outcome is final. I have nothing left to prove. I have nothing left to defend. The war is over. The peace is here. And I am ready to live in it. I am ready to enjoy the fruit of my labor. I am ready to be the woman I was always meant to be, not a sister, not a caretaker, not a guest, just a leaner, just the owner, just me, and that is enough. It has always been enough. The rest was just noise, and the noise is gone. The silence is golden. The silence is mine. I wake up the next morning to the sound of birds in the garden. The sun is streaming through the curtains. I get out of bed and walk to the window. I look out at the lawn. It is green and well kept. The trees are tall. The fence is solid. Nothing is out of place. I breathe in the air. It smells like grass and earth. It smells like home. I smile. It is a small smile, but it is real. I turn away from the window and start my day. I have work to do, I have a life to live, and I have a house to maintain, but I am not afraid of the work. I am not afraid of the responsibility. I welcome it. It is mine. And I will take care of it. Just as I took care of myself, just as I took care of the truth, the legacy is secure, the future is clear, and I am walking into it with my eyes open. No more shadows, no more lies, just the light. Just the truth, just me. This is the end of the story, but it is the beginning of the life. The revenge was not the destination. It was the bridge. I crossed it. I am on the other side, and I am not looking back. The past is settled. The future is waiting, and I am ready. I am ready for whatever comes, because I know who I am, I know what I have, and I know what I will not tolerate. The boundaries are set. The rules are clear, and I am the enforcer. I am the judge. I am the jury, and I am the owner. The verdict is in, guilty, evicted, removed, and I am innocent, vindicated, restored. The balance is right, the scale is even, and I am standing on the solid ground. The ground that is mine. The ground that I defended. The ground that I keep. Forever, the coffee is brewing. The smell fills the kitchen. I sit at the table. I open my laptop. I check the emails. There is a notification from the county. The tax assessment for the next year is available. I click on it. I review the numbers. They are correct. I approve the payment. I schedule the transfer. I close the laptop. I drink my coffee. It is hot. It is bitter. It is perfect. I look around the room. It is quiet. It is mine. And I am home. I am finally home. And no one can ever tell me otherwise again. The lesson is learned. The price is paid. The value is recognized. And I am the asset. I am the investment. I am the return, and I am profitable, I am solvent, I am secure, and I am free. The wind blows outside, the trees sway, the house creaks, it is a living thing, and I am its heart. I pump the life into it, I maintain its structure. I protect its integrity, it is a partnership, and I am the senior partner. Sarah was a tenant, a temporary one, a failed one. She is gone, the space is clear, the air is fresh, and I am breathing it in. Deeply, fully, without restriction, without permission, without apology. This is my space. This is my time. This is my story, and I am writing the next chapter. Alone, but not lonely, secure and strong, and ready, always ready, for anything, because I have already won. The battle is done, the war is over, and I am the victor, quietly, calmly, absolutely, the end.